Good morning, everyone. We are starting the portion of Nitzavim, one of the last ones in the book of Deuteronomy. And today I'm sharing with you a synopsis of the Rebbe's talk in Likutei Sichos, volume 14, the third talk of Nitzavim. Just an introduction. In this week's Torah portion, chapter 30, verse 1, the Torah reads the following. What's fascinating, the following three verses that I'm going to read to you, there is no Rashi, which means the Rebbe says, if Rashi does not bother to explain any, it's self-explanatory. And if you have a question, you have to dig a little deeper and find the solution yourself. Here is what it says. What will happen is, when all these things come upon you, while you are among all nations where God, your God, has banished you, which are the things, the blessings and the curse which I have set before you, you will take it to your heart, and you'll return to God, your God, with all your heart, with all your soul. You will listen to his voice, to everything that I'm commanding you today, and your children. Then God, your God, will return you captives from exile, and he will have mercy upon you. He will gather you again from all the nations where God, your God, had dispersed you. Is that simple? So God says to Rebbe, what does Moshe say to the Jewish people? That when we are expelled in exile, God wants us to return back to him. What does he do? He forces us to return back, to call out to God, to repent, to say to God, we're sorry, and then God will return, take us, our children, and brought us back from the nations. But what is the catalyst that will make us return to God? The blessings and the curse. That's what the main theme here. When all these things will fall upon you, abracha ve'aklala, the blessing and the curse that I place before you, and then you'll put it in your heart among all that you find yourself among all nations, and you realize it's time to return to God from exile. Is that clear? Simple, right? Says Rabbi, I don't understand. A curse will push us to connect to God because things are in trouble, right? There is no atheist in the foxhole, right? When you are in a pinch, you look for everything. And of course, you try everything. You trust this army, you trust that weapon, you trust this leader, and nothing works. So you turn to God. But how can a blessing will bring us closer to God? It says that God says, when all these things will fall upon you, the blessing and the curse, that will make you put it on your heart, meaning start contemplating seriously, deeply, and it will make you return to God, realizing that you are in exile as a cause of your departure or separation from God. And now that connecting to God, God will return to you and take you out of exile. That's the question the Rebbe is asking. Yes?
It's the opposite. The blessing we back because God promised to bless you, but he's going to curse you. Who needs it?
Well, the Torah, Moshe tells the Jewish people that they are far from God. That's why they are in exile, to begin with. But God says it's not good. We need them to change their status. They need to return back to the Holy Land, to the spiritual Holy Land, the state of connection to God. So what does God do? He will bring you blessing and curse that you'll put on your heart and realize that you have to return to God. And it's time for you to go out of exile.
You'll make the choice.
In other words, the cause for you to turn to God is a curse. That makes sense. Things are very tight. I just told you there is no atheist in the foxhole.
The choice.
But there is no, it's not talking about a choice. All these things. You know what? All inclusive of everything. The blessing and the curse that I place before you. Then it'll make you put it in your heart and realize that you have, that God, Asher Edichacha, Hashem Elokecha Shama, Veshavta, and that will make you return. Says Rabbi, I understand, blessing will make you return to God. Curse makes you return to God. In other words, if you have something that we're talking about making a change, if you have blessings, we read before many times that the blessing actually make Va'ishman Yeshurun Va'ivat. When you give up too many blessings, what happens to people who study it in Tanya this week? It makes people to stay away from God. And we read it, by the way, I read it last week, and we're going to read it again next week. It's all Tachat Asher Lo Avata, all the curses, 98 curses in the portion of Tavo, is because you serve God without joy. In other words, you had, why? Merov Kol, from so much, from abundance of good. Moshe curses the Jewish people that God is so kind to them, give them so much, that it makes them stay away from God. How can the blessings make you come to God? And the Rebbe says, I think it's worth interjecting. Perhaps this is Moshe is just telling them the future, just prediction of the future, that when they enter the Holy Land, they will be blessed, they will be cursed, and that will make them turn. In other words, it will be an order of events. First, they will enter the Holy Land, they'll be blessed, then they would stay away from God, and they'll get cursed, and then they'll realize they are far from God. That's why they're coming back. You understand that? Says the Rebbe, it doesn't make sense. Number one, because the prediction of a vision for the future, the prediction of the future is in the portion of Vayelech. Vayelech, the next portion, Moshe tells the people, let me tell you what will happen to you. And I know God will be very kind to you, and you'll go astray. And then God will punish you. So it's next week. Number two, when Moshe is giving them the future about after they enter the Holy Land, nothing about a blessing. It doesn't say they will be blessed. It says that they will enter the Holy Land, they will disobey God, and they will get cursed. That's it. Nothing about a blessing. And number three, and the most important question, the Rebbe says, how is it possible to predict that the Jewish people will be blessed? After all, we have free choice. We're going to be blessed. God says, I place before you the blessing and the curse. Ubacharta b'chaim, choose life. You choose life, you'll be blessed. There is no such thing as a blessing without having a choice. So if you tell me it's the prediction of the future, Moshe is predicting what events will take place, it's impossible to say that because their blessing are going to be dependent on their choice. And if they didn't choose that way, there is no way to predict. Even God cannot predict it. Therefore, says anybody can guess what. So again, we're coming back to the question. Moshe tells the Jewish people in this week that when all these things will come upon you, the blessings and the curse, it will make you, push you to connect to God, reconnect to God, and get out, realize that it's time to go out of exile, and God will be awake, waiting for you, and He will take you back and return you back. The question that I was asking, a curse is what drives us to connect to God. Why a blessing? Why does it say the blessing? Anybody has an answer? No answer. So here's the Rebbe's answer. And the Rebbe says, Rashi is not bothering because you have to find the answer yourself. Now, the Rebbe says that Rashi was teaching to a 5 years old, and therefore the 5 years old student knew the answer. I have yet to find a 5 years old that Rashi talked to. Definitely not people that I know. Says the Rebbe, there is a major distinction when someone is being cursed. Let's say he loses the house, the car. That's very devastating, and a person starts running an inventory. Where am I vis-a-vis God? Versus someone who's very blessed first. And the Gemara says there is no comparison between two poor people, one who used to be rich and the other that never grew up in a rich home. In other words, in order for God to make our heart purely reconnect to God, the curse must be a purely deep curse. How do you do that? You give a great blessing first. Ali, do you get it? It makes sense? Simple. Only the Rebbe finds it. Says the Rebbe, in order for a man to return back to God, the cause must be very, very deep so that the return will be complete. How do you achieve that? Cursing alone is not enough, because if someone was born during the Holocaust period, Someone who's born in Israel in the 50s where there was not enough oil or eggs or flour. I grew up, I was a child during the Yom Kippur War in 78, 76, 74, 73, October 73. I call it 74 because the Jewish year was right after. The end of 73, October 73. We rationed. I had to go every day with a note based on the number of kids who were home, and that's how many eggs. We got an egg per child per day, and so much flour, and the same is about sugar and oil. Well, I think I shared with you. My mother sent me a note to go and purchase, and I sleep in Israel. The sidewalks then weren't paved properly. I slept, and my eggs, I had 5 eggs. They cracked, and I sat down and cried because I couldn't come home. My mother, this was Thursday afternoon. My mother was going to bake a cake for Shabbos. There was not going to be a cake. And an old Russian lady met me at the time, and she used to work at the grocery. And she asked, "Child, why are you crying?" And I told her. She made me get up. She cleaned up my hands. My hands were wet, my pants. She says, "Come, let's go back." She took me back, and she convinced the manager of the grocery shop to give me again because she had mercy. So that's the idea of a blessing and a curse that will happen. And the Rebbe completes what happens if someone is cursed without being blessed. Then you can say that he is not returning completely. Says the Rebbe, look in last week's Torah portion, or a few weeks ago, the portion of Re'eh. Re'eh. God says, "See, I place before you the blessing and the curse. Et abracha asher tishmeun. The blessing will come upon you if you listen, if you obey." The word asher, if, can be translated in 2 ways. One is if, on condition. The other one is al menat, on the condition that you will. What's the difference? If you listen, it means if you listen, then you'll get blessed. What happened before you listen? You don't get blessed. Only after you listen. Al menat, meaning I'm giving you in advance. I'm blessing you. Therefore, Rashi translate the word asher, that if you listen, not in the words of if, but al menat, on condition that. In other words, God is giving us the blessings beforehand and the condition that he knows that we will obey. What happens if we disobey? Then he'll give us the curse. But when the curse comes after the blessing, it will push us to have a very deep teshuvah. So far, so good. So the Rebbe, this is very connected to Rosh Hashanah. And Rosh Hashanah, when we turn to God and we ask him for a blessing, God is not going to turn back and say, "Okay, you promised to be better. You promised to show up once a month to synagogue. You promised not to chat. You promised to give more tzedakah. Let's wait. Let's see what you do. Give me some on the account. Give me advancement. Give me a deposit." God says, "No, al menat. We'll make a condition. You make good resolution, I'll give you a good year. And then you have the whole year to fulfill it." In other words, says the Rebbe, even the worst kind of a Jew, when it comes to Rosh Hashanah, he is going to get advancement of benefits and blessings for the whole year before he even start fulfilling the commitment. And this is the lesson from this week's Torah portion. I hope I made myself clear. I want to wish everyone Shana Tova, to be blessed and sealed and inscribed and sealed in the book of life. And we should share many good news, because next time when we study, it's going to be next year. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Thank you.